Yeah, Dom, thank you very much indeed. Host of the Fight Show, of course, here on Sports Tonight Live. Tell me your immediate reaction to the extraordinary event over the last 48 hours in Munich.
Well, it was building from the moment Chisora arrived in Germany, of course. I mean, we know about the slap at the weigh-in and then spitting at the brother in the ring, Vladimir. Obviously, even at the end, there was all sorts of nonsense in the ring, all detracting from the fact that Chisora had put on a really good show. You know, he'd gone the distance with Klitschko and pushed him in every round. He didn't win the fight, but he did so much better than anyone had given him any chance of doing. And then the scenes afterwards, and you can ask all sorts of questions about it. David Haye, should he have been there? You know, he was trying to antagonise the Klitschkos. It was Chisora's moment. So I know that Frank Warren, of course, the promoter of Chisora, has made the point that, you know, Haye shouldn't have been there. It was Chisora's moment, which is true. But Chisora, of course, shouldn't have reacted the way he did. Ultimately, it's two fellas that have let down themselves and embarrassed the sport, but people shouldn't forget that boxing is more than these two heavyweights from Britain. And, you know, you only have to look at the Klitschkos to know that, know that, you know, the vast majority of boxers are a credit to the sport and gentlemen.
Yeah, Dom, I've got to agree with Dom, not for the first time, that an absolute gentleman and an example to any child. And that's the thing, we take kids off the street who are really struggling to try and get them into a disciplined sport like boxing, and everyone would always say that's such a good path to take. Now, you've got the two boys that are champions, and you've got two that are fighting each other. Dom, I thought straight away that surely there's going to be a match now between Haye and Chisora. As soon as I saw Haye anywhere near the joint, I straight up thought this has been plotted, and there will be a fight now between Chisora and Haye, and that's them getting ready for their ticket boost.
Well, I did actually speak to Chisora on Friday night, late on, would you believe? And he said it was post-slap at the weigh-in. And the question was obviously put to it, you know, why did you do that? And he said, well, they've messed me around for 18 months, the Klitschkos, so I owed him a slap. I'm going to give the brother a slap, and I'm going to give David Haye a slap as well. So you've got to wonder, you know, just exactly what Chisora going over there, what he had in mind, you know, prior to all the nonsense. And David Haye, of course, was going there to try and rope in Vitali for a fight. But yeah, it looks now that, you know, was this a stunt? I don't think it was. I think by the nature of you know, the eyes of Chisora, in terms of the way he looked like he completely lost it. I don't think it was a stunt. I think, and also obviously Haye's reaction, he looked like a startled guy, and that's why he lashed out the way he did. I think it was natural. It was just a ridiculous moment that just embarrasses the man. And I think in terms of any fight, well, it's going to be interesting to see the sanctions that are imposed on Chisora. Of course, David Haye doesn't have a license to box anyway. So, you know, any kind of sanctions or any trouble that he gets into may well just be a police matter, whereas Chisora, of course, could have all sorts thrown at him now in terms of the ban and everything else. So that fight, I wouldn't imagine, would be in the immediate future for that very reason. But it's possibly one that may well happen. Frank Warren's already distanced himself from any such fight, said he wouldn't want it. So we wait and see. There'd be money to be made out of that, of course, down the line. But it's a messy, embarrassing stain. And again, you're going to get all the people that don't understand the sport talking about banning it and all that absolute rubbish. You know, you don't ban football because Carlos Tevez may be a mercenary or Luis Suarez, you know, is guilty of racist abuse. They're individuals that have let down themselves in the sport. That's all this is. Individuals that have let down themselves in the sport, but the sport is miles bigger than them. You know, 800 boxing clubs, 16,000 kids that take part in boxing. As Splash points out there, you know, this is a thing, an absolute amazing power for good, the sport of boxing. Any of the little bit of badness in it is vastly outweighed for the good and the way it can change lives.
Dom, there's obviously some bad blood between Haye and Chisora. We've seen that quite openly. But would Haye really want to fight Chisora? Surely it's the Klitschko that he really wants to fight, isn't it?
It is, but the reason why he wants to fight Vitali Klitschko is for money. Now, if there is any way that a fight with Chisora down the line could make the kind of dollars that he can earn off Vitali, then it's possible, particularly if he thinks that he can beat Chisora. I think anybody watching the fight at the weekend, though, the way Chisora went about his business with Klitschko, and given the fact that Haye did really so poorly against the younger brother, a guy who isn't as powerful as Vitali, then many would actually argue that Chisora could win that fight, which seems absolutely incredible when you think he's lost 3 of his last 4 fights. But that's a deceiving stat in itself, because he really morally won the fight in Finland against Hellenius, and he went into the fight with Fury, desperately unfit. He reckons he was depressed because he didn't get the fight with Vladimir Klitschko that David Haye nicked off him in Chisora's head. So that's where the bad bloods come from, the fact that Chisora feels hard done by, that Haye got his night with Vladimir, and he had to wait so long, 2 fights cancelled before he got in the ring with a Klitschko. It'll run and run, of course, but you know, it's got to be put in context of the fact that it's just two individuals.
Sure.
Dom, how does this actually work with Tyson Fury? Tyson Fury beats Derek Chisora, and he beat him overwhelmingly, and then
I'm not so sure he beat him overwhelmingly. He beat him, you're right, but I think that if you look at it, you know, Chisora was completely overweight. He hadn't trained. There's no two ways about it. He was not in good shape. So, you know, without being a Chisora apologist by any means, you know, you could look at that fight and say, well, you know, that's not Chisora at his best. I mean, at the weekend we saw Chisora probably at his best. Now, does that Chisora beat Fury? It'd be an interesting fight now.
Yeah, that's where I was going, Dom. That's exactly where I was going, because I'm sure Tyson Fury's sitting at home thinking that his status in the world game has obviously been accelerated by Chisora doing so well.
Yeah.
So
well,
now
it's only a couple of weeks ago, Flash. We're talking about, you know, Fury. He has to fight Price. These are the two young heavyweights that fought at amateur status, and Price beat Fury in the amateurs, and you know, one's from Liverpool, one's from Manchester. It's got it all going on. The two giants of men, they're both over 6'7". So you know, they're very marketable. But now, of course, Chisora has really put himself on the map for all the wrong reasons. But he has put his name out there. You know, boxing fans knew all about it. Not many other sport fans really knew much about Chisora. No one gave him a prayer at the weekend. Everybody knows who he is now.
Yeah.
Which means that he's sellable.
Yeah, I mean, do you have any cynical view of this? Flash does. Flash has a cynical view, and it's say, you know, maybe it was stage managed in the idea of what was going to happen, which got completely and utterly out of control.
correct.
Well, look, you know, anything's possible. There's that old saying that you know, a lot of people in boxing get very frustrated with, but you know, that's boxing, because it's all the inference that there's so much dodgy stuff going on, and so much cynicism attached to it. You wouldn't really write anything off. It always seems to be, you know, if you think back to any of the nonsense in press conferences, it's rarely the other weights. It's usually the heavyweights, because they are the big guys, and you know, they are the ones that attract the attention, and they are the ones that tend to sell the fights more than the other fighters in terms of the nonsense that they talk and all the actions and everything else. You know, who knows? You'd have to have some pretty privileged conversations to find out if there was anything in that. But I'm not so sure. I think it was just the nonsense of the night. I'll tell you one thing that I couldn't stop thinking about, though. He'd just gone 12 rounds with Klitschko Chisora, and he wanted to fight someone else in the ring after it. And then he's fighting David Haye. He's got some energy, that lad, now.
He must have. I also think that it's actually been hyped out of all proportion, because we do expect these sort of things to surround the profession of boxing. We do expect squabbles, we do expect unruly behaviour. It's part of, as you quite rightly say, of the huge level of stress and tension and angst that exists within the profession. So I wasn't actually, I'm not as appalled as most people that we've been able to talk to on the streets today.
Mike, honestly, if you go into boxing gyms and you go to fights up and down the country, and you watch amateur shows and you watch professional shows, 99.9% of the time you are struck by the sheer hospitality of gyms, by the welcoming nature of the fighters, by the fact that there's massive camaraderie, even amongst the guys that fight themselves normally. You know, how many times do they hug after a fight? Every time. Yeah. Except for the odd, weird incident like this weekend. But the respect that boxers normally show each other up and down the country is immense. And that is usually backed by a knowledgeable crowd that behaves itself as well. So overall, boxing is a very, very positive experience. Whether you go training in a gym, fighting, whatever, usually it is, you are treated with nothing but respect, and everybody knows the rules. And you treat your opponent with nothing but respect. That's why, really, I suppose it's news when it does spill over. I don't accept that it's just a bit of fuss and nonsense. It's horrible to see that, because for all the reasons I've just stated, people should be talking about the fact that these lads can knock lumps out of each other for 12 rounds, then go and have a beer, and that's usually the way it is. And you know, they're usually the best of friends in boxing. So it's disappointing when something like this happens. And also remember, don't forget, it's the stupid shouting, really, of Chisora at the end. The shooting stuff, the burning stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just pathetic.